So here we are in the West Portal district of San Francisco. I'll let this tram pass. These are the main tram tracks that go into the tunnel of West Portal and down to the financial district. So it's easy access to downtown, but it is a bit noisy and creates a little bit of rumble on the ground sometimes. This is the house that we purchased back in April of this year, and to give you a little idea of how the house looked and what shape it was in when we first purchased it, I can tell you the front stairs that you see now are white with the new stucco on. These were all collapsing. The wall that holds up the stairs themselves they were all red brick. They had broken apart and collapsed due to dry rot around the bottom of the walls and around the front facade. And as we realized those were going to have to be pulled off, we did some further investigation and found that there was continued dry rot underneath all of the windows. You can see the new windows that are in, and we'll take a closer look at that as we get into the building. But all the dry rot had to be cut away and pulled away, and the more we pulled off some of the bad framing, the more we discovered the greater issues, that the dry rot and some of the framing issues and the lack of proper foundation work caused us to spend a lot more money doing the structural improvements to make the house stable. So we'll walk across the street and I can kind of point out and walk you through some of the elements that we saw and how we corrected them. So approaching the house, you can see that the driveway is cracked. There was a lot of water settling in here, which before we reframed the stairs, all that water was going under the stairs, both from the top cracks in the plaster, but also underneath and undermining the stair foundation. So you can see this all has to be replaced in here, and you can see the cracking all the way out, and then some settlement further out where the water and some of the sidewalk flags have settled in. So that is going to have to be removed. But that shows you kind of the condition of the house and the kind of long-term lack of maintenance on it. The house, pretty much, this tells the story of the condition of the wiring in the house. It was all knob and tube. If you look up in here, you can see some of the old knob and tube wiring. A lot of it was kind of scabbed on and added to in ways that kind of made me a little bit nervous looking at it. So it needed a full upgrade. We have brought in our electrician, and we're doing that as part of the overall renovation of the house. It'll all have brand new wiring, and it requires it. To meet city codes today, there's a lot of things you have to do to the house you didn't have to do 50 years ago. The codes are changing all the time, so even this year we're having to upgrade certain parts of the house we would do anyway, but wouldn't otherwise have to under the old codes. If you look down at the garage floor, we had to replace a section of the, which you can't see, but is under this plywood, a section of the drainage pipe to the house, which had collapsed and wasn't draining properly. It runs from the house all the way out to the street. So we'll be checking once we remove the driveway. We'll check what's under the driveway as well to make sure the pipe is not defective in this section. But from this point forward, we've replaced all the plumbing in the house. We've changed the main cast iron drain pipes. We've corrected some of the damaged ones. We've added new ones in the fixing of the house. So ultimately, when the house is done, again, it'll all be new drain pipes and it'll all be operating properly. When the pipes break and they have slight breaks and they leak over time, it can undermine the house, and that's what happened in several areas of this house. One of the interesting things is the exterior roof drains and all of the outside drainage and the interior soil pipes. In San Francisco, all that water goes into the same pipes. It goes into a sewer pipe. As opposed to outside San Francisco, most communities have separate sewer and stormwater drains. In San Francisco, they're connected. So several areas of the house that had outside gutters that had broken away or weren't draining properly were going into the outside storm drain and then into the house drains and out to the street. That all had to be corrected, which we've done as a process of renovating the house. Now let me show you some areas back here. Starting with the foundation work that we had to do. We had to put in new steel beams. This is for seismic shear and also to support the old structure of the house. They go up in a frame from this floor, the ground floor, up to the living level. We have two frames, one at this location in the garage and one towards the back of the house, which I'll show you. So it's a large steel frame that has welded joints, cross pieces, and it really supports the house from the lateral loads during an earthquake or movement of the house. One of the things we couldn't do because there was some settlement in the house, there's maybe close to 2 inches or a little over 2 inches settlement from the east side to the west side of the house over time. Remember, this house is almost 90 years old. So there's some settlement. So what we had to do is put this frame in. This frame is level, but then the house structure itself is a little bit out of kilter, so we have to then fur down and match up with the level of the frame to the level of the house. So it causes some extra work, but that's part of how we have to deal with this house in this condition. Okay, so if you move towards the back here, in this area on the other side of this wall is part of the house that has an opening that goes down into a back room. We'll look at that in a minute. But in addition to the steel structure in the house, we have to put in what's called shear walls to stabilize the house. So that's what's called diagonal shear. And you have a wall here that will have complete shear all through the garage on this side and also on the opposite side. Those get inspected by the city and approved as we go through the progress of the building before we can put any sheetrock on. So that's all part of it. So this area is the area under the entry of the house. You can see through this opening here is the underside of the front stairs that had collapsed. And we had to, as I said before, we had to completely remove that area, put in new foundations under the stairs with, you'll see the bolts in the foundation, and all new framing. And you can see the old framing just above that opening, which is the stairs that go to the front entry. So those were left, and then we replaced the whole wall along here. Now this wall was dry rotted, had dry rot all the way along over to the garage door. So that was a fairly significant change. Then if you move around here, I'll show you. Throughout the house we have what's called these steel hold downs, and you can see it here up in the corner of this framing. You can see the old and the new framing, and also the metal clips across the top. And the reason for that is you have to tie anything you do structurally into the house into the original structure, and so it can all work together to resist any kind of earth movement or earthquake. Then all along the front here, maybe we can go outside just for a second here and I'll show you. It'll be a little more clear. Right up under the scaffolding here, this is the bottom part of the windows in the living room. This whole beam was dry rotted out. In fact, I have a box full of the old dry rot material that our framer just scooped out with his hands. It was that bad, which means that this was just a matter of time before it completely collapsed. We have shored it up. We have put in a new beam underneath the windows and the proper flashing. You can see where it's been cracked here in the stucco. This has to still come off, and we have to have another beam underneath that, which we're about ready to do. But when this is done, it will all be watertight and supportive of the upper floor and in great shape. These are where the original stairs were from the garage level up to the main floor, living level. We had to replace those. They were cracking on one side. Because of the house movement, they were off kilter a bit. So we tore those out and we just put in framed in new stairs. And these will have hardwood back on them. But this stair gets you down from the upstairs down into the lower living level, which is along this direction. You can see as we walk back here there were other pipes. These were the old drain pipes from the roof we had to pull out and replace because they were broken. There was a whole series of pipes in this pit over here that were failing, coming apart. This is where they connected a lot of the roof drain pipes and some of the soil pipes for the sewer in the house. So we have replaced those. Now as you take a look here, you'll see the second steel frame beam, and this is so that the back end of the house also has the support it needs to resist lateral forces. This beam is welded to a cross piece, and that goes into this side of the house. You can cut that out. And this goes up actually 3 stories. This beam was required to go all the way up to the 3rd floor, as opposed to the other one, which was 2 stories, so it can support the back end of the house and make sure that it has the proper support and resistance. And in doing that, we also had to put in a new beam, support beam, from the garage. You can see running from the garage wall that separates the garage from the living space all the way out here to this back room. Now, this room we're standing in now was a kind of a family room, but it was actually kind of put together in piecemeal. It wasn't very well constructed. The ceiling was made out of 2x6s and is the support for the deck above. The deck above was failing, water was collecting on the deck, there were leaks in here, and so we had to remove that and replace, the city required us to replace it with proper structure to support the deck above and the ceiling underneath here. So these are all new 2x12 beams, joists, that span from side to side, and in addition, you can see the old framing on the side, which we kept, and we put sheer plywood on the outside to support the house. On the opposite side is the old framework as well that we left, and that will have sheer plywood on it. And then the front of the house of this level, we put in a new window. It had a small window here, and we put sheer ply on the outside and new siding. All the siding material on the outside, by the way, was all asbestos. So it's required to remove that if you're going to be doing these kind of changes. So I had to hire a special company called Synergy that did the asbestos removal, which is somewhat costly, but it's required. It has to be bagged up and deposited in certain sites that they allow this kind of material to be stored in. So if we go back up, we'll go up to the main part of the house. Yeah, one other thing I wanted to point out was that you can see the change in color of the concrete from this side to this side. This was the original slab. What had happened in this house, another problem due to the water and drainage problems, this whole section of foundation was breaking away and falling into the backyard. So all this section along here, you can see as we replaced all this, we added a new foundation all the way up to here where the old one is, and you can see how it's slanted downward. Now we've made that up in framing and the new foundation. Now this is all completely stable and in up to standard code as far as the foundation to support the structure above. But this was a very important part that we didn't know until we pulled back some carpet and saw a big crack all the way along this part of the house that went from side to side. So that was then something that we had to deal with, and we did, and now it's fixed. But those are things that, again, as we peel back portions of covering in the house, we discovered we had to deal with them, and now they're fixed. So here we are on the main living level, the second floor of the house, and what we have is the existing areas where the existing windows were that I replaced in kind. So what I did is I took the original windows out, which were single pane, and all of them had some dry rot around the edges and had some evidence of leaking. And we pulled those out and replaced them with similar windows, but double pane. These are Marvin windows, good thermal control. but they needed to be replaced so they'd operate properly. And then, as you can see along the bottom of the windows, there's a copper flashing, which we put in to avoid the problem that we inherited when we bought the house of water leaking into this area and dry rotting out the support structure. As you look around, you'll see above the windows, in this area, there's what we call hold downs. These are steel brackets that bind the floors, tie the floors together, and structurally stabilize the front of the house. So it gives a special degree of strength. On top of that, we'll add some plywood around the frame of this, and that also will be added strength to the house. And these were required by the city. So when we do this work on the house, the city requires you to put in these type of elements in here to strengthen it up to a level that's standard for the industry. There's hold downs here as well. These are all bolted into the side of the structure. And then above the hold downs is a little hard to see, but there are what we call clips, and each one of these clips ties the horizontal beams into the floor above, and those are also necessary. You'll see those around the house as we walk around. As you look at the front door, you can see more of these clips around that basically take what's called the rim joist or the beams of the house and tie them into the floor structure. So it's another added element to make the house very strong and stable. And then as we turn and look back at the middle of the house, this is the steel column and cross piece. So this is the steel frame that's over and above the one that's in the garage. So the garage frame continues right up here, and these are all welded and have to be inspected by licensed contractors, and they're signed off by the city for the welding and the bolting of this structural connection. And then in addition, we had to add what's called a parallam beam we used to connect this back structure all the way forward to the second structure that you saw below, and then tied across. So this has a steel stirrup, an iron stirrup, and bolted in place. So it makes the house very rigid. And then we added, you'll see another frame structure at the back of the house here that goes up similar to the other one, across and down the other side. And this frame has another frame on top of this to stabilize the top floor, and you'll see that when we get up there. Now, the deck back here was existing, but we had to, this is the top of the ceiling of the room below we just looked at, where we replaced all the 2x12 joists and put in a new structure, reframed it. We had to put in also a new floor, plywood floor that slopes to the proper drainage in the back. This is where the problem was when we first bought the house. There was a lot of pooling of water in the back that was dangerous for the house because it was leaking in and destroying the framework, the structure. So this floor will then have another floor on top of it, but we have a roofing company that will come in and seal this floor so it's moisture proof and no leaking. This is where the old kitchen was. The old kitchen was on this wall, stopped here. There was a little room here. We took this out. It didn't have the proper wiring. It did not have the proper vents. There was some asbestos wrap vents, which are typical in these houses of this age, that we had to remove. Again, that was also done by a certified team to remove asbestos. We removed all the asbestos wrap ductwork and out of the house, and we put in the new standard type vents. This will be for the new cooktop. The old cooktop was not in really working order. We run new gas piping to make sure that it's all fitted properly and we don't have issues with gas leaks. But you can see all the new piping in the house that we had to put in for venting and drainage. Where it comes down from the bathroom above, and we had the original pipe here, but we had a break in the pipe here that was leaking, and so we had to remove all this section and put a new pipe in. So this is from here up is all new, actually from here up, and this is the original. Now let's go upstairs and I can show you what was done up there. We're coming upstairs here. This is the top floor. You're looking down on the framework that holds this floor up. This is the perimeter wall. We had to put clips in, as I was mentioning before, that kind of holds the framework together so it acts in unison against earthquake or any other kind of settlement. The house back here, this is one of the guest bedrooms. We had 2 existing windows that look similar to this, but they were dry rotted out at the base. There was some water leaking in. The arch tops I wanted to keep. One of the important things in this house was to preserve the exterior as best we could in its original design. So we left that in place. So with that in mind, we created the arch windows to match what was here before. But we stopped the leak in the process. So the windows were put in place, new flashing around the outside. That will be finished, stuccoed around the edge, and it'll look just like the old windows, but they'll be new. So 2 of these were put in. And then we had, between the 2 guest bedrooms, we have a shear wall, again required by the city. This shear wall goes all the way up to the underside of the roof. There was no insulation in the house except in the ceiling. There was what was called an R11, which is very, very substandard. So right now you're required to put R30 in a roof. So we're putting R30 insulation and all new insulation around all the walls of the house, so it'll be all up to standard and contain the heat for efficiency. This is the second guest bedroom. I want to show you this because we did replace the 2 front windows as well in here that were substandard. But also, this is the area where the flue from the original fireplace, a wood-burning fireplace, came through and goes up and ties into the roof for vent. But this was in bad shape. We had to pull this off, pull the flue out completely, and take the original fireplace out and put a required gas fireplace, not a wood-burning one, but gas one, and then reroute the flue. So we corrected this problem too. This was a leaking problem at the roof level and in this wall section here. And then as we go out here to the original bathroom of this level, there was only 1 full bathroom in the house, and that was here. The original bathroom had a small pedestal vanity and a toilet and a tub. All the tile, much of it had been pulled off and replaced. It was leaking, it was cracking. Not only did it not look nice, but it wasn't efficient. It was actually in bad shape. So we had to pull that out and replace, we will be replacing all the fixtures and all the tile and the floor material, which was old vinyl asbestos we pulled off, and cleaning it all up so it now doesn't have the problems that, that we saw. In addition, there was a window here into the light well. We had to pull that old window out and replace it with a new window. Again, it'll all be properly flashed and caulked around the edges to prevent water from coming in. But this was, again, every window had to be replaced in the house, and we wanted to do it so they're the proper dual pane and also properly flashed. All right, now we're in the final bedroom, the last bedroom, the top floor. It's going to be a nice bedroom, but what was here before was a wall that was here and another wall separating this into kind of 2 not very useful spaces. In fact, one room had its window into this, like what you call sunroom. This was all one of the poorest areas of the house. This roof was failing, it was falling in. All around the edges there was water intrusion. There was only a plywood dilapidated floor on it. So we corrected all that. We pulled that off, and we then brought up the steel, which is behind this fir plywood. And inside here is the rest of the steel frame that goes up. You can see it above here in the ceiling. It's a cross piece and meets the steel on the other side. So this is a rigid frame, what you call a rigid frame in structural terms. And then the roof, which was not really even draining. We had to then build a new roof on top and slope it. And we'll be putting in new drain pipes and proper scuppers required by the city, and for just the normal drainage of the roof, which will go down into the house, tie into the sewer line, and out to the street. So that's essentially the bulk of the work that we're doing. Again, as you walk through the house, you see certain structural elements. Again, more tie downs here that are bolted into the structure. This is all required by the engineer. I think in all the things that we've seen in the house, you can see how much work has gone into it that you would not really see if you just walked into the house. You might see the damaged areas and the water leaks and the staining and the problems with the ceiling and the plaster coming off, but you wouldn't see behind that the structural issues and the drainage issues with the piping and everything else in the house. So I think in the end what we've done is we've stripped that away. A large part of our work was required because of the structure of the house beginning to fail, and the front steps and the dry rot, and as we uncovered more and more, we found out we were required by the city and also good building practice to repair all this. But in doing that, as you open up more, then you have to do more. You have to bring the electrical up to code, all the plumbing up to code, the windows, etc. So we've got a house that we've fixed all the problems and made a better house in the end. And I think this is what I hope to show in this, this film, that people can see behind the walls you have an infinitely better house, a strong house, and a house that's built to current standards.